The millionaire came home early. His security chief whispered, "Stay quiet." The reason was shocking. My name is Adrian Sterling, and I'm a 32-year-old tech millionaire living in one of Manhattan's most exclusive penthouses. The view from my floor-to-ceiling windows overlooks Central Park, and my net worth is somewhere in the neighborhood of $250 million. To anyone looking in from the outside, I have everything. I have nothing. The penthouse is empty most of the time. I work 16-hour days building my empire, attending board meetings, making deals that could make or break smaller companies. I date women, beautiful, accomplished women, and it's comfortable. It's expected. It's absolutely hollow. My security team is the only constant in my life. They rotate in and out, but there's one person who's been with me for the past 3 years, and he's become something more than staff. His name is Marcus Chen, and he's my security chief. Marcus is 5 years younger than me, which makes him 27. He's devastatingly handsome in a way that seems almost unfair: sharp cheekbones, black hair that falls across his forehead, and dark eyes that miss nothing. He's efficient, professional, and somehow manages to be both intimidating and comforting at the same time. I'd never actually told myself that I was attracted to him. That would require me to acknowledge certain things about myself that I wasn't prepared to acknowledge. But I was aware of him in a way I'd never been aware of another person. I was aware of his presence in rooms. I was aware of when he was near. I was aware of the way my body responded to proximity to him. It was something I'd gotten very good at ignoring. My life had been built on ignoring things. I'd ignored my mother's subtle disappointment when I went into tech instead of law. I'd ignored the fact that my relationships with women felt performative. I'd ignored the way I'd sometimes find myself looking at men in ways that felt dangerous. I'd ignored everything that didn't fit into the carefully constructed image of Adrian Sterling, billionaire entrepreneur. The ignoring was working fine, right up until the day everything changed. It started with a company retreat in the Hamptons. My company, Stellar Tech, had grown from a startup to a multi-billion-dollar operation in just 8 years. We specialized in AI and machine learning applications for major corporations. I'd built it from nothing, and it had become everything to me, the only thing that mattered, really, because if I focused hard enough on work, I didn't have to think about anything else. The retreat was meant to be a celebration. We rented an enormous estate property with a private beach, catering, the works, 300 employees plus their plus ones. It was the kind of event that required serious security, which is how Marcus ended up being there in more than a purely professional capacity. I was giving a speech on the beach at sunset because apparently that's what successful people do when I noticed Marcus standing near the back of the crowd. He was in his typical security stance, alert, watching the perimeter, but something was different about him that day. He looked different, younger somehow, more relaxed. I lost my train of thought mid-sentence. "And that's why innovation is our greatest asset," I heard myself saying, even though I'd been about to say something completely different. I finished the speech on autopilot, and when it was over, I made a beeline for him. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Fine," he said, and there was something in his voice that made me hyper-aware of how close we were standing. "Good speech." "You looked like you were somewhere else," I said. "Just thinking about something my sister said," he replied. I wanted to know what his sister had said. I wanted to know everything about Marcus Chen, which was a dangerous path of thinking that I immediately shut down. "Well, don't think too hard," I said, attempting what I thought was a charming smile. "Try to enjoy yourself, you deserve it." He smiled back and something shifted in my chest. "Thanks, boss." That night I attended a dinner with my executive team. It was the kind of event where everyone was performing their version of themselves: ambitious, driven, successful. I was performing my usual version, confident, in control, completely fine being alone even when surrounded by people. After dinner, there was a bonfire on the beach. I found myself standing apart from the crowd, staring at the ocean, which seemed to have a calming effect on my racing thoughts. Marcus appeared next to me with 2 glasses of whiskey. "Thought you might want one," he said. I took the glass. "You're not supposed to drink while on duty." "I'm not on duty right now," he said. "The property is secure, my team is handling it." We stood in silence for a moment, and I became acutely aware of the fact that we were alone, or as alone as 2 people could be at a crowded party. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said. "Of course." "Do you ever get tired of this?" "This?" All of it, the parties, the performances, the pretending that you're completely happy when you look like you're one conversation away from losing your mind. I was startled by his observation. That's quite an assessment. I've been watching you for 3 years, he said quietly. It's hard not to notice things. Something in that statement made me turn to look at him directly. He was looking at the ocean, not at me, but there was an intensity to his expression that suggested this conversation was important to him. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, which was the coward's way out. I think you do, he replied. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think that's why you look so miserable all the time. I'm not miserable, I said defensively. You're lonely, he corrected. There's a difference. The accusation hit harder than it should have. Is this appropriate conversation for an employee and employer? Probably not, he admitted, but I'm tired of watching you pretend. Life is too short. Before I could respond, one of my executives called out to me. Marcus moved away and the moment was broken. But it stayed with me for the rest of the night, burrowing under my skin like something I couldn't quite reach to extract. After the retreat, things changed subtly between us. Marcus began saying things that were just slightly beyond the boundaries of professional. Comments about how I should do something for myself or questions about whether I was actually happy with the women I dated. It was like he was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before I would shut it down. And the thing was, I didn't shut it down. Instead, I found myself looking for reasons to be near him. I'd work late and coincidentally be in the lobby when he was doing his evening rounds. I'd take walks through Central Park and happen to encounter his team conducting perimeter checks. I was being obvious and I was pretty sure he knew it. I was also in denial about what it all meant. My therapist, yes, I have a therapist because apparently even billionaires have issues, was not subtle about her observations. You seem preoccupied, Dr. Patterson said during our weekly session. Is something happening at work? No, everything's fine, I lied. You've said that 3 times in the past 5 minutes. I was quiet for a moment. There's someone on my security team, he's good at his job. And she prompted. And nothing, he's just good at his job. Adrian, I've been seeing you for 2 years. I've never heard you talk about any of your security team members before. What's different about this person? I didn't want to answer the question. Answering it would mean acknowledging something I'd spent 32 years avoiding. He makes me want to be better, I finally said. He looks at me like he sees through all the bullshit, like he knows who I am underneath all of this. And who are you underneath all of this? Dr. Patterson asked. I have no idea, I admitted. Perhaps that's something to explore. But I didn't want to explore it. I wanted to ignore it the way I'd ignored everything else. 3 weeks after the company retreat, I did something that was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. I invited Marcus to dinner. Not as a security chief, as a person. I told myself it was a thank you dinner for his excellent work. I told myself it was just dinner between colleagues who'd become friendly. I told myself a lot of things that were probably lies. I chose an Italian restaurant in a quieter part of Manhattan, somewhere we were unlikely to run into anyone I knew. When Marcus arrived, he was wearing a dark suit that fitted him perfectly, and his hair was styled in a way that suggested he'd put effort into his appearance. The realization that he'd dressed up for me made my heart race in a way I was not prepared for. This is nice, he said as we were seated. I have to admit I'm surprised by the invitation. Why, I asked. Because bosses don't usually invite their security chiefs to dinner, he said, at least not in my experience. Maybe I'm not like most bosses. You're not, he agreed. That's one of the things I like about you. Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. We talked about his background. He'd grown up in San Francisco, went to college for criminal justice, had always wanted to be in security. We talked about his family. He had 2 sisters, his parents were still together, they were close-knit in a way that made me feel a pang of envy. We didn't talk about why I'd invited him, we didn't talk about anything that mattered. But at the end of the night when he walked me to my car, he said, "Thank you for tonight, for seeing me as more than just staff." "I've always seen you as more than that," I said. "I know," he replied, "that's why this is so complicated." He didn't wait for a response. He just walked back toward his car, leaving me standing on the street with the knowledge that whatever was happening between us was about to become impossible to ignore. I stopped pretending after that night. Not publicly, I was still too scared for that, but privately I began to allow myself to acknowledge the truth: I was in love with Marcus Chen. The realization was both terrifying and liberating. For 32 years, I'd built walls around this part of myself, told myself it wasn't real, told myself it would pass. And then Marcus had walked into my penthouse 3 years ago, and those walls had started to crumble brick by brick. I began paying attention to things I'd previously ignored. The way he smiled when he thought no one was looking. The way he spoke to my other staff members with genuine kindness and respect, not the professional distance I'd always assumed was necessary. The way he'd sometimes catch me looking at him and would hold my gaze just a moment too long before looking away. I started finding reasons to be alone with him. I'd ask him to review security protocols, knowing full well that I didn't actually care about security protocols. I'd invite him to late-night work sessions, during which we'd order takeout and talk about everything except work. I was being obvious and I no longer cared. The woman I was casually dating at the time, a lawyer named Patricia, noticed the shift. "You're distracted," she said one evening as we were having dinner at my penthouse. "I'm not," I lied. "You are, you keep looking at your phone like you're expecting a message from someone else." "I'm not expecting. Adrian, I like you, but I also respect myself, and I'm not going to be someone's second choice, so either we're doing this or we're not." The kind thing would have been to end it immediately. The honest thing would have been to tell her that there was someone else, but I was still a coward, so I said, "You're my first choice." She looked at me like she knew I was lying, and then she left. I didn't try to convince her to stay. A week later, I finally broke. I was working in my home office late at night, 3 a.m., the kind of time when everyone in their right mind is sleeping. Marcus was doing his rounds and he knocked on my office door. "You should sleep," he said, stepping inside. "Sleep is for people who don't have a million things to worry about," I replied. He came around my desk and looked at my computer screen, at the spreadsheets and financials I was pretending to work on. "You're not working, you're just sitting here thinking about something." "How can you tell?" I asked. "Because I've spent 3 years learning to read you," he said quietly, "and right now you're spiraling." I stood up and faced him. We were close enough that I could have reached out and touched him. I wanted to reach out and touch him. I was terrified of reaching out and touching him. "Why are you still here?" I asked. "This job doesn't require you to be here at 3 a.m. "Because you're here," he said, "and I'm trying very hard not to care about that and failing miserably." "Marcus." "Let me finish," he interrupted. "I know this is complicated. I know you're my boss and I work for you, and there are about 1,000 reasons why this shouldn't happen. But I can't keep pretending that I don't feel what I feel. I can't keep standing in rooms with you and pretending that I'm not aware of every breath you take. I can't keep doing this." "Doing what?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "This thing where you look at me like you feel something and then you retreat back into your carefully constructed fortress and pretend like I'm just staff. I can't do it anymore." I was quiet for a long moment, and then I did something I'd never done before. I was honest. "I'm scared," I said. "I know. I'm scared that if I acknowledge this, it will ruin everything. It will ruin the professional relationship we have. It will make things complicated at work. It will force me to come out, and I'm not ready for that." "I know," he said again. "But I'm also more scared of not acknowledging it," I continued. "I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I'd just been brave enough to take a chance." He reached out and took my hand. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental, like a threshold being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We figure it out as we go," he said, "just like anything else worth doing." We didn't kiss that night. We just stood there holding hands, understanding that something fundamental had shifted between us. But the kiss came the next evening. Marcus had the night off, which was rare. He usually worked 6 days a week with only 1 day to himself, but he'd arranged to have the evening free and he'd asked if I wanted to spend it with him. The question was innocent enough on the surface, but we both knew what he was really asking. I said yes. He came to my penthouse around 7 in the evening, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking more approachable than I'd ever seen him. We ordered Thai food and we sat on my couch and we talked. But underneath the conversation was a current of electricity, a awareness of what we both wanted and neither of us had quite admitted. "Tell me something true," he said at one point. "Like what?" "Like something you've never told anyone else." I thought about it. When I was 14, I knew I was different. I knew I was attracted to boys in a way I wasn't attracted to girls. And I spent the next 18 years telling myself that it was just a phase, that I was just confused, that if I worked hard enough and achieved enough and became successful enough, it would somehow go away. "Did it?" he asked. "No," I said, "it just got stronger, until I met you and it became impossible to ignore anymore." He leaned toward me and for a moment I thought he was going to kiss me. But instead he said, "I need you to know that this is real, that I'm not using you, I'm not taking advantage of the power dynamic, I'm not doing this for any reason other than the fact that I'm in love with you, I need you to know that." "I know," I said, "and I need you to know that I'm terrified, but I'm here, and I'm choosing to be here with full knowledge of what that means." He kissed me then. It was soft at first, almost tentative, like he was checking to make sure this was real. And then it deepened and I felt like I was coming home after a lifetime of being lost. Every wall I'd spent decades building came crashing down in an instant. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No," I said, "I'm terrified, but I'm more okay than I've been in my entire life." We couldn't tell anyone. Well, we could have come out publicly, dealt with whatever consequences came, but we both knew it was more complicated than that. There was the power dynamic to consider. Marcus worked for me, which meant there was an inherent imbalance in our relationship. HR policies existed for a reason. We couldn't just announce our relationship and expect it to be fine. There was also the matter of my reputation. Adrian Sterling, tech billionaire, was carefully positioned as a certain type of person. He was aggressive in business, methodical, brilliant. He was also straight, or at least everyone assumed he was. Coming out would change how people perceived me, would open me up to scrutiny I wasn't prepared for. And there was Marcus's safety to consider. Coming out to the public meant putting a target on his back. People could be cruel, vindictive. I had enemies in the business world, people I'd beaten in competitions, companies I'd destroyed. I couldn't protect him from all of them, but I could at least try to manage who knew about our relationship. So we kept it secret. It was exhilarating and suffocating in equal measure. We couldn't touch at work. We couldn't look at each other in ways that mattered. We couldn't exist in the world as what we actually were to each other. But we had those stolen moments, late nights in my penthouse, evenings when Marcus had a rare night off, quick conversations that lasted only seconds but felt like hours. For the first 3 months, it was almost sustainable. We told ourselves we were being practical. We told ourselves this was what maturity looked like, understanding the complexities of a situation and managing them accordingly. Then came the day that changed everything. I came home early. It was a Tuesday afternoon, which was unusual for me. I normally worked until at least 8 or 9 at night. But I'd been feeling unwell, a cold or the flu, something minor, and my assistant had insisted I go home and rest. I'd argued, but eventually I'd relented. The penthouse was quiet when I arrived. My housekeeper had left for the day. I wasn't expecting anyone. I certainly wasn't expecting to hear voices coming from my private study. My first instinct was security. I reached for my phone to call Marcus to tell him there might be an intruder, but then I recognized one of the voices and I stopped. It was Marcus. And the other voice was unfamiliar, male, calm, speaking with an accent I didn't recognize. I moved quietly toward the study, my heart racing. The door was cracked open just slightly and I could see into the room. Marcus was there and he was with a man I'd never seen before. The man was in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that suggested money and power. "This has to end," the man was saying. "I know," Marcus replied, and his voice was small in a way I'd never heard before. "I'm trying." "Trying isn't enough, you're jeopardizing everything, do you understand that?" "I understand." "Does he know?" "No, he has no idea." My blood went cold. "Keep it that way," the man said. Adrian Sterling is a valuable asset to this organization. We can't have a scandal. We can't have something that could be used against him. What organization? I said, pushing the door open. Both men turned to face me. Marcus's face went completely white. Mr. Sterling, the older man said smoothly, I wasn't expecting you. Clearly, I said, who are you? My name is Director James Rothstein. I work for the CIA. I stared at him and then I looked at Marcus, whose expression had gone from shocked to devastated in the span of a heartbeat. Marcus is a field operative, Rothstein continued. He's been embedded in your security detail for the past 3 years. His job was to monitor you, assess potential threats to your company, and report back to us. The room spun. Everything suddenly made sense. Marcus's expertise, his background, the way he moved with military precision. And it all felt like a lie. You're lying, I said, even though I knew it was true. I wish I was, Rothstein said. Marcus, tell him. Marcus stood up and I could see him struggling with how to approach this. Adrian, I can explain. You're a spy, I said. You've been spying on me this entire time. The assignment started out as just security, he said, but things changed. Things changed, you manipulated me, you got close to me, you made me think. I couldn't finish the sentence. Made you think what? Marcus asked. That I was in love with you, Adrian, that's not. Enough, Rothstein interrupted. This is exactly why fraternization is against policy. Marcus made a mistake. He allowed his personal feelings to cloud his judgment. That ends now. What are you talking about? I asked. Marcus is being reassigned, Rothstein said. Effective immediately, he'll be transferred to our London office. New operative arrives tomorrow. You won't even notice the difference. I felt like I couldn't breathe. You can't do that. I can, and I am, Rothstein said. This was a complication we didn't anticipate, but it's manageable. Marcus made an error in judgment. He'll be reassigned and we'll move forward as if this never happened. This is my company, I said. My security detail, you can't just. Actually, we can, Rothstein said quietly. And we have been for the past 3 years. I suggest you accept the new arrangement and move on with your life. He left after that, and I was alone with Marcus in the room that suddenly felt very small. How much of this was real? I asked. All of it, Marcus said. Adrian, everything I feel, everything that happened between us, it was all real. But it started with a lie. Yes. You came into my life under false pretenses. You used your position to get close to me. You used my feelings too. I didn't use your feelings, he said forcefully. I tried to distance myself, I tried to keep it professional, but you, he stopped, regrouping. You made it impossible, you kept finding reasons to be near me, kept pushing boundaries, and I was weak. I was in love with you and I couldn't keep pretending. So you just decided that was okay, I said. That you could just ignore the fact that you were spying on me, that your entire presence in my life was based on deception. No, he said, it wasn't okay, nothing about this is okay, but I didn't know what else to do, I couldn't turn it off, I couldn't stop feeling what I felt. You should have, I said coldly, you should have stepped away, you should have recused yourself from the assignment, you should have done literally anything other than what you did. You're right, he said, you're completely right, I made a terrible mistake. But please believe me when I tell you that my feelings for you are real. That's the one thing in this entire situation that isn't a lie. How am I supposed to believe that? I asked. How am I supposed to trust anything you say when I've just learned that you've been lying to me for 3 years? He didn't have an answer, and I didn't wait for one. I left the study and locked myself in my bedroom, and I didn't come out until I was sure he was gone. For the next week, I didn't see Marcus. A new security chief arrived the following day, a woman named Agent Sarah Chen, no relation apparently, who was strictly professional and utterly forgettable. She did her job with competence and detachment, and I hated every second of her presence because she wasn't Marcus. I threw myself into work with a vengeance. I had meetings I didn't need to attend, I wrote code that didn't need to be written, I built projects that didn't have a purpose. I was running and I knew it, but I didn't know how to stop. My therapist noticed immediately. You look terrible, Dr. Patterson said at our next session. Thank you, I said flatly. Something happened with the person you mentioned before, the one from your security team. I didn't see the point in lying anymore. He was a CIA operative assigned to spy on me. Apparently, that's a thing that happens to billionaires. The government assigns spies to your security detail. And I fell in love with him and he said he fell in love with me, but I don't know if any of it was real because it all started with a lie. Dr. Patterson was quiet for a moment. Do you think his feelings were a lie? I don't know, I said. That's the problem. I can't separate the real Marcus from the operative Marcus. I don't know which version was genuine. People are rarely just one thing, she said. It's possible for both to be true. He could have been assigned to spy on you and also genuinely fallen in love with you. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. It feels like they are, I said. I understand why, but I want you to consider something. You said you were in love with him too, correct?
Yes.
And that love, as far as you knew, was based on getting to know him over 3 years. It was based on his actions, his words, his presence in your life. That foundation still exists, doesn't it? He still did all those things. He still was present in your life in those ways. The fact that he was also spying on you doesn't erase those other things.
But
I'm not saying you should forgive him immediately, she continued. I'm saying that maybe the question isn't whether his feelings were real, but whether you're willing to hear him out, whether you're willing to listen to his side of the story without judgment. I left that session without answering her question. 3 days after that therapy session, I received a letter. It was handwritten, which was shocking in itself. Nobody wrote letters anymore, but Marcus had written me a letter and he'd found a way to get it to me through some intermediary I couldn't identify. I almost threw it away without reading it, but in the end, I opened it.
Adrian,
I don't know if you'll even read this. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but I need you to know some things even if you choose not to believe them or care about them. The assignment was real. Rothstein was telling the truth about that. When I took the job, my only mandate was to monitor your activities, assess threats to your company, and report back to the agency. It was supposed to be straightforward. Go in, do the job, get out. I'd done it 100 times before. But then I met you. You were nothing like I expected. You were brilliant and driven, yes, but you were also lonely in a way that broke my heart. You were so busy building your empire that you'd forgotten to build a life. And I found myself wanting to be part of that life not as a spy but as a person. I should have reported my feelings to Rothstein. Policy dictated that I should have asked for reassignment, but I was a coward. I wanted to stay, I wanted to know you, I wanted to find out if maybe, against all odds, you might feel the same way about me. When I finally told you how I felt, I was fully aware that I was violating about 12 different protocols. I was aware that I was compromising my assignment. I was aware that if things went wrong, both of us could suffer the consequences. But I also believed, and I still believe, that what we had was worth the risk. I understand why you can't trust me right now. I understand why it feels like everything was a lie. But Adrian, I need you to know that the person you fell in love with was the real me. Not some operative persona, not a cover me. The parts of myself that I showed you, the vulnerabilities I shared, the love I felt, that was all real. I'm in London now. I don't know if I'll ever come back. Rothstein made it clear that any further contact with you would be considered a breach of protocol, so I'm writing this as a goodbye and as a plea. Don't let this ruin what you could have. You spent 32 years hiding from who you are. I know my deception has made that harder, but please don't go back into the closet because of me. Please don't use me as an excuse to retreat from your life again. Be brave, Adrian. Be the person I know you can be, the person I fell in love with. I love you. That's the truest thing I've ever said.
Marcus.
I read that letter 17 times over the next week. Each time I believed it a little more. Each time I felt the anger drain away and something else take its place. Grief, maybe, longing, the acute awareness that I'd thrown away the best thing that had ever happened to me. I made a decision. I was done playing it safe. I was done living in the shadows. I was done letting fear dictate my life. I called my assistant and told her to cancel everything for the next week. All meetings, all calls, all obligations. Then I booked a flight to London. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just packed a bag and got on a plane, and I tried not to think about what would happen if Marcus refused to see me. London was cold and gray when I arrived. I got a hotel near the Thames and spent the night preparing what I was going to say. I rehearsed it about 100 times and each time it sounded ridiculous, but I was going anyway. The CIA office was harder to find than I'd expected, but I had resources and resources can find almost anything. I showed up at their London headquarters the next morning with no appointment and no plan except to demand to see Marcus Chen. The woman at the front desk looked at me like I was insane. "I don't have anyone by that name," she said. "Operative Marcus Chen," I said. "Recently transferred from New York, he works directly with Director Rothstein." "I'm sorry, sir, I really can't help you." So I did what any desperate millionaire with no impulse control would do. I called Director Rothstein. "Adrian Sterling," he said when he came on the line. "I was wondering when you'd do something stupid. Marcus predicted you would. He said you were the type to ignore advice and do exactly what you shouldn't do."
Is he there? I asked.
"No."
Where is he? That's classified.
"Director, I have about $250 million and extremely good lawyers. I will find out where he is, one way or another. It would probably be easier if you just told me." There was a long pause and then, "He's in Prague, working a different operation. Adrian, I need you to understand something. This is over. Marcus is a professional and he's moved on. You need to move on too." "I'm not letting him go," I said. "I understand the assignment, I understand the protocol, I understand all the reasons why this is complicated. But I love him and he loves me and I'm not spending the rest of my life pretending that's not true."
If you pursue this.
"Then what?" I interrupted. "You'll arrest me, you'll expose me, you'll make my life difficult. I'm a billionaire with nothing to lose except the one person who matters. You're going to have a very hard time stopping me." I hung up before he could respond. Prague was beautiful in a way that made my heart hurt. Marcus had always wanted to visit Europe. He'd mentioned it once in passing and I'd noted it down in the mental file I kept about him. Seeing the city now, walking through its streets felt like I was walking through part of him. Finding where he was staying proved more challenging. The CIA had clearly been careful about his location, but I hired a private investigator and private investigators are very good at finding people. 3 days later, I had an address. I almost lost my nerve about 100 times on the walk to his apartment building. What if he'd moved on? What if Rothstein had been telling the truth about him moving on? What if showing up like this was the worst possible decision I could make? But I'd spent 32 years being careful, being cautious, being safe, and it had led me to a life that was empty despite being full of everything anyone could want. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life wondering what if. His apartment was on the 4th floor of a nondescript building. I knocked on the door and for a moment nothing happened. Then I heard footsteps and the door opened.
It was Marcus.
He looked different, thinner maybe. His eyes were the same dark brown I'd been dreaming about for weeks, but there was a caution in them I'd never seen before. He was looking at me like I was a hallucination, like I might disappear if he blinked. "Adrian," he said, and my name in his voice felt like coming home. "Hi," I said, which was probably the dumbest thing I could have said.
What are you doing here?
"I came to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen, even if what I have to say is the worst idea you've ever heard." He stepped back and let me into his apartment, which was small and sparse, clearly temporary accommodation. We sat down and I took a breath. "I've had 3 weeks to think about everything that happened," I said. 3 weeks to process the fact that you were assigned to spy on me, that our entire meeting was orchestrated, that I fell in love with someone who was ostensibly using me for intelligence purposes." I paused and he looked down like he couldn't bear to see my face. "And you know what I've realized," I continued, "none of that matters."
His head snapped up.
"It doesn't matter," I said again, "because you were right. People are rarely just one thing. You were a spy, yes. But you were also the person who made me feel seen for the first time in my life. You were the person who challenged me to be better. You were the person who loved me when I didn't even know how to love myself."
Adrian.
"Let me finish," I said. "I came here to tell you that I'm done hiding, I'm done pretending, I'm done letting fear dictate who I am, I'm done with all of it, and I'm done without you." "You can't do this," he said quietly. "Coming here saying these things, it's going to destroy your life. Rothstein will retaliate. Coming out as gay, leaving your company, associating with a CIA operative, it's all going to come out and it's going to be messy and awful and... I know, I said, and I don't care.
You should care.
Why? I asked. What's the alternative? I go back to New York, I pretend this never happened, I date women I don't care about and build a legacy that feels empty. I spend the rest of my life running from who I am.
Yes, he said, because that's easier.
Easy is overrated, I replied. I want real, I want you, I want to build a life with someone who actually knows me, even if it's complicated, even if it's messy. He stood up and walked to the window, and I could see him struggling with something internal. You don't understand what you're asking, he said. If we do this, if we're actually together, there are people who will come after you. There are people who will use you to get to me, there are. I don't care, I interrupted. Marcus, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, I have lawyers, I have resources, I have everything I need to protect myself, and I have something more important, I have clarity about what I want, and what I want is you. He turned to face me, and I could see tears in his eyes. I'm in love with you, I said, and it was the easiest thing I'd ever said because it was completely true. Not the spy Marcus, not the operative Marcus. You, all of you, the person who reads at 3 in the morning and listens to terrible pop music and has a terrible habit of leaving dishes in the sink. That person, I love you. He came back and sat down next to me, and he took my hands. If you do this, he said, you can't go back, your life will change fundamentally. It's already changed, I said. The moment I met you, my life changed, I'm just finally admitting it. He kissed me then, and it felt like forgiveness and promises all wrapped up together. It felt like the beginning of something real. We left Prague together 3 days later. I'd made a lot of arrangements in those 3 days. I'd hired lawyers to help navigate the legal implications of being involved with a CIA operative. I'd arranged for my company to be managed by my CFO for the next 6 months, and I'd scheduled a press conference for when we got back to New York. I'd finally decided to take control of my narrative. The press conference was held at my company headquarters. The room was packed with journalists, my board members, and curious onlookers. I stood at the podium with Marcus standing slightly behind me, a gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the room. I'm here to make a personal announcement, I said, and I could feel my heart pounding. For the past 32 years, I've lived my life in a particular way. I've been very successful professionally, but I've been dishonest with myself and with the world about who I am. That ends today. I took a breath. I'm gay. I have been my entire life, and I spent decades trying to pretend that wasn't true. I'm done pretending. I'm done hiding. I'm done being dishonest about the most fundamental part of who I am. There was silence in the room, and then I continued. I'm also here to tell you that I'm in a relationship with someone I love very much. His name is Marcus Chen. He works in security and he's the best person I know. And yes, I know there are going to be questions about professional boundaries and power dynamics. I'm committed to addressing all of those concerns transparently. We're both working with HR and legal counsel to make sure everything is handled appropriately. But make no mistake, I said, looking directly at the cameras, I'm not ashamed of this. I'm not hiding, and anyone who has a problem with who I love can deal with it. I'm moving forward with my life, and I'm doing it openly and honestly. The questions came fast after that. Reporters shouted over each other, asking how long we'd been together, how I'd kept it secret, what my family thought. I answered what I could and deflected the rest. When it was over, Marcus was there, waiting for me. That was brave, he said. That was terrifying, I corrected, but necessary. The reaction was mixed, as it always is. My mother called me crying, saying she'd always known but was glad I was finally accepting myself. My father was quieter but eventually acknowledged that what mattered was my happiness. My board was concerned about optics, but they came around when they realized my company was too valuable to lose over this scandal. The business world had its opinions. Some clients dropped us. Other more progressive companies approached us about partnerships. My stock price dipped slightly before recovering. Life, as it turned out, went on. But there were complications I hadn't anticipated. Rothstein came to see me about a week after the press conference. He was not happy. You've jeopardized an entire network, he said, sitting across from me in my office. Your relationship with Marcus was supposed to be discreet. Instead, you've broadcast it to the entire world. That was my choice, I said calmly, and it's a choice I'm not going to regret. You may regret it when we have to pull Marcus from active operations, he said. His cover is blown, his effectiveness is compromised, he can't do the work anymore. Good, I said, maybe he should do something else. Like what? Rothstein asked. He's been a spy for 12 years, it's all he knows. He's a lot of things, I said, and I have the resources to help him figure out what he wants to do next. Rothstein left frustrated, but ultimately there wasn't much he could do. I owned my own company, I had billions of dollars, and I had the legal right to be with whoever I wanted. Marcus did retire from active operations about 2 months later. It was a hard transition for him, being a spy had defined him for over a decade, but with my support and therapy he eventually adjusted. He started consulting on security for different companies, work that he could do while maintaining a more normal life. Living with Marcus was different from the stolen moments in my penthouse. It was better and harder at the same time. Better because we could just be us without the secrecy and stress. Harder because real life is not romantic. Real life is dishes and arguments about whose turn it is to do laundry and figuring out how to merge two very different lives into something cohesive. You're leaving socks everywhere, I said one morning, tripping over a pile of black socks in the hallway. You're leaving your laptop everywhere, he countered. Yesterday I found it in the refrigerator. That was one time. Exactly, he said, you're not denying it. We fought about stupid things, we made up about stupid things, we developed rituals and routines, we learned how to be a couple in the real world, not just in the fantasy version of a relationship. And it was perfect in its imperfect way. A year after coming out, I made another announcement. I was stepping down as CEO of Stellar Tech. I'm tired, I told Marcus when I was explaining the decision. I've been running at full speed for 12 years and I'm exhausted. I want a different life. What kind of life? He asked. One where I wake up with you, I said. One where I have time to think about something other than quarterly earnings. One where I'm present in my own existence. My CFO took over the company and I transitioned into an advisory role. It meant a significant cut to my daily involvement, but it also meant freedom. Freedom to spend time on passion projects. Freedom to travel with Marcus. Freedom to just be. We took a month-long trip to Europe. We visited all the places Marcus had wanted to see: the Eiffel Tower, the canals of Venice, the temples of Spain. We traveled like two people in love without pretense or performance. We also met with a therapist together, someone who specialized in relationships with complicated power dynamics and unusual circumstances. It helped us process the trauma of the revelation, the secrecy, and the messiness of it all. What I hear, the therapist said one session, is two people who love each other deeply but who are still grappling with issues of trust and honesty that stem from how this relationship began. Can we get past it? I asked. You already have in many ways, she said, but trust is built over time through repeated demonstrations of honesty and consistency. You're doing that, keep doing that. 2 years after the press conference, Marcus and I started exploring the idea of marriage. Same-sex marriage was legal in New York, had been for years, but Marcus wasn't sure he wanted it. What if it becomes another weapon? He asked one night. What if someone uses it against you? Let them try, I said. I'm not going to spend my life hiding anymore. If people want to use my marriage to Marcus as some kind of scandal, that says everything about them and nothing about me. He thought about it for a while, and then one evening he took me back to the place where we'd had our first real conversation, Central Park, near the boat dock. I've been thinking about this all wrong, he said. I've been thinking about marriage as a vulnerability, as something that could be used against us. But it's not. It's the opposite. It's us declaring publicly and permanently that this is real, that we choose each other, that nothing anyone else says or does will change that. He got down on one knee and my heart stopped. Adrian Sterling, I love you. I've loved you since the day I met you, even when I was supposed to be surveilling you, even when I was lying to myself about what my feelings meant. You've changed my life. You've made me braver. You've helped me understand that sometimes the greatest act of courage is admitting what you want and going after it. Will you marry me? Yes, I said, and I didn't even hesitate. 1,000 times yes. We got married 6 months later. It was a small ceremony about 100 people held in a garden outside of the city. My family was there, Marcus's family was there, his sisters cried happy tears, my mother hugged Marcus and whispered something that made him smile. I'd spent 32 years building an empire, but as I stood at the altar looking at Marcus in his suit, I realized that what I'd actually built was a fortress. And he was the only person who'd ever been brave enough to try to break through those walls. "You look terrified," Marcus whispered when we were finally alone for a moment. "I am," I admitted. "What if I screw this up?" "You won't," he said, "and if you do, we'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is, right?"
I guess it is, I said.
We exchanged vows that we'd written ourselves. I talked about how he'd saved me from a life of pretense. He talked about how I'd taught him that love was worth the risk. We cried, people in the audience cried. It was a beautiful, genuine moment. That night, we didn't have a big party or reception. We went back to our home, a beautiful house we'd bought together outside the city, and we made love with a tenderness that came from 2 years of trust being rebuilt, one day at a time. 5 years after coming out, my life looked completely different from what I'd imagined. I was no longer the CEO of Stellar Tech, though I was still involved in major decisions. The company had continued to thrive under new leadership, and honestly, I didn't miss the stress of running it day to day. Marcus had started a consulting firm focused on corporate security and had already built a reputation as one of the best in the business. He loved it in a way he'd never loved working for the CIA. We'd bought a house, we'd gotten a dog, we'd traveled to 15 countries, we'd built a life that felt authentic in a way I'd never thought possible. My relationship with my parents had improved significantly. My mother had actually become an advocate for LGBTQ+ rights, and I suspected that had something to do with watching her son fall in love and be happy. My father was quieter about it, but he came to Pride with us one year, which I took as a significant gesture of support. And yes, there were still challenges. Homophobia still existed, people still made comments or assumptions, but I had someone to share those challenges with, and that made all the difference. 7 years after the press conference, I received a letter from Director Rothstein. I almost threw it away, but something made me open it.
Adrian asterisk.
"I'm retiring," it read. "I spent my career believing that the ends justified the means, that security and national interest trumped personal happiness. Watching you and Marcus build a life together made me reconsider that philosophy. I was wrong to assign him to your security detail without knowing what that would cost both of you. I was wrong to keep you apart. I was wrong about a lot of things. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, both of you. You're living proof that sometimes the most radical thing you can do is be honest about who you are." Director James Rothstein. I showed the letter to Marcus and he read it twice. "That's something," he said finally. "It's an apology," I said. "It's an old man's attempt at redemption," Marcus replied, "and I'll take it." Marcus and I had been talking about adoption for years. We had the resources, we had the love, we had the commitment. What we didn't have was clarity about whether we actually wanted to do it. "What if I'm not good at being a parent?" Marcus asked one day. "What if I am?" I countered. "We won't know until we try." "You know what else we don't know? Whether being a parent will ruin this." He gestured between us. "What if we get so caught up in raising kids that we forget why we fell in love in the first place?" "That's possible," I admitted. "But it's also possible that having kids will make us love each other even more. That's what happens for a lot of people." We thought about it for another year, and then, one day, Marcus came home with information about adoption agencies. We'd both apparently come to the same conclusion independently, that we wanted this, that we were ready for it. 2 years later, we brought home 7-year-old Maya, who'd been in the foster system for 5 years. She was brilliant and damaged and angry, and she needed people who understood that recovery isn't linear. A year after that, we adopted James, a 10-year-old who'd been through more trauma than anyone his age should have experienced. Our house, which had been quiet and orderly, became loud and chaotic. Maya had nightmares, James had trust issues. There were days when I wondered if we'd made a terrible mistake. But there were also days when Maya came home from school and immediately found me to tell me about her day. Days when James asked if he could call me Dad instead of Adrian. Days when both kids were laughing at something Marcus had said, and I realized that we'd created something beautiful out of chaos. 10 years after coming out, Marcus and I had a conversation about our beginning that we'd been avoiding for a long time. "Do you ever think about it?" he asked, "about the spy thing?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Do you?" "All the time," he said. "I feel like there's this invisible weight between us that we never talk about, like we're both pretending that everything starting with a lie is fine as long as we've built something real since then." "Is it not fine?" I asked carefully. "I don't know," he said. "Sometimes I wonder if you would have fallen in love with me if you'd known what I was, if you would have even given me a chance." "Probably not," I said honestly. "I was too scared, too hidden. I probably would have fired you and found someone else." "See," he said, "and that's the thing that gets me. Our entire relationship exists because of a specific combination of circumstances. Because I was assigned to spy on you, because you fell for me before you knew the truth. If any one thing had been different, we wouldn't be here." "Is that a bad thing?" I asked. "I don't know," he repeated. "How do you feel about it?" I thought about the question seriously. "I think," I said slowly, "that life is about working with what you have. You came into my life under false pretenses, but you also challenged me, you pushed me, you made me confront who I was hiding from. Were your methods ethical? No. But the outcome was that I became myself, that I stopped running from who I am. I can't wish that away, even if it started with a lie." "I'm sorry," he said, "for the lie, for the deception, for all of it." "I know," I replied, "and I forgive you. I forgave you a long time ago, actually. I just didn't know how to say it." He held my hand and we sat in silence for a while. The weight between us didn't disappear completely. I don't think it ever would, but it felt lighter, more manageable. On the 10-year anniversary of the day Marcus had come home early and found the CIA director in my study, we had a private celebration. We'd arranged for someone to watch the kids for the night. We went to the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first real dinner, back when we were still pretending that what was between us was professional. "Do you remember this place?" Marcus asked as we were seated. "Of course," I said. "I spent the entire dinner trying not to let you know how much you affected me." "I knew," he said, grinning. "It was written all over your face." "You made it so difficult," I said. "You'd say these things and I'd have to pretend they didn't matter." "But they did matter." "They mattered so much," I said. "That's the scariest part. They mattered more than anything I'd ever wanted before." We ordered wine and talked about our journey. Not just the romantic parts, we talked about the hard parts too. The scandal, the adjustments, the trauma of starting a relationship with a lie. "Do you regret it?" Marcus asked. "Any of it?" "Not for a second," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "Even the spying part?" "Even that," I confirmed, "because it led me here, it led me to you, it led me to this life where I don't have to hide anymore." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I love you," he said. "In every version of our story, the spy version, the secret version, the public version, I love you." "I love you too," I replied, "in every version too." 15 years after coming out, I received a request from a publishing house. They wanted me to write my autobiography. At first I declined. My life felt private, precious. The idea of sharing it felt like an invasion. But Marcus convinced me otherwise. "Your story could help people," he said. "People who are scared about coming out, people who think their life can never change, people who think love is too complicated to be worth the risk. Your story could change how they see themselves." So I wrote the book. I told the truth about being a closeted billionaire. I told the truth about the CIA. I told the truth about how falling in love forced me to be honest with myself. I told the truth about the messy reality of what happens after the dramatic coming out moment. The book became a bestseller. People wrote to me about how it had helped them come out. Young people said it had given them hope. LGBTQ+ organizations asked me to speak at events. But the most important letter came from someone unexpected, director James Rothstein. "Adrian, I read your book. I relived the parts where I was the antagonist and I didn't like what I saw, but I also understand that your telling of those events is truthful. I did what I thought was necessary. I didn't consider the human cost. Now, at the end of my life, I think about the years I might have stolen from you and Marcus by insisting on secrecy and separation. I'm sorry for that. For what it's worth, I believe your story matters. I believe it will help people. And I'm glad that you and Marcus found your way to each other despite my attempts to keep you apart.
With respect, James.
He died 6 months after sending that letter. Marcus and I attended his funeral, which surprised a lot of people. But Marcus had finally come to see that Rothstein was just a man who'd done the best he could with the knowledge he had. 20 years after coming out, Maya and James graduated high school. They were going to different colleges on different paths, but they were both thriving, both healthy, both living openly and authentically. At Maya's graduation, she gave a speech about the power of chosen family. She talked about how she'd come to us broken and we'd helped her heal. She talked about Marcus and me being open about our relationship, about being proudly queer in a society that still had work to do. I grew up in a system that told me I was worthless, she said, and then I found parents who told me I was valuable, not just to them but to myself. That changed my life. I cried, so did Marcus, so did half the audience. At James's graduation a few weeks later, he dedicated his academic achievement to his family. He talked about how hard it was to believe in your own potential when nobody else does. But he'd learned to believe because his parents believed for him until he could believe for himself. Adrian and Marcus taught me that love isn't just about romance, he said. Love is about showing up over and over again for the people you care about, even when they're difficult, even when they're broken. Love is about believing in someone until they believe in themselves. I couldn't have said it better. On our 20th wedding anniversary, Marcus and I renewed our vows. We were older now, there was gray in both our hair. We had lines on our faces from smiling, from worrying, from living. We'd built a life together that had depth and complexity and realness to it. I can't believe we're still doing this, Marcus said as we were getting dressed for the ceremony. What, getting married? No, he said, choosing each other. Every single day I'm amazed that you choose this, choose me. You know you don't have to convince me, right? I said. I chose you 21 years ago when you knocked on my penthouse door. I choose you every day. I'll choose you tomorrow and the day after that and forever. Even knowing how this started, he asked, and there was still a note of vulnerability in his voice. Especially knowing how this started, I said, because it taught us both something. It taught me that I was capable of change. It taught you that love was worth the risk. The renewal ceremony was small, just family and close friends. We exchanged new vows different from the ones we'd written 20 years before. These vows acknowledged the journey, the struggle, the complexity. They also acknowledged the joy and the certainty we'd found despite it all. I vow to keep choosing you, I said, even when it's hard, even when we don't understand each other, even when life gets messy and complicated. I vow to keep showing up. I vow to be honest with you, Marcus said. In the deepest parts of myself, in the parts that are hardest to reveal, I vow to trust you with who I am. It was a beautiful moment. It was also a practical acknowledgement of what we'd learned, that forever isn't a destination you reach, it's a choice you make over and over again. On our 25th anniversary, we received a package from the State Department. Inside were letters, dozens of them. Letters from people whose lives had been changed by our story. A woman who'd been forced into a marriage with a man had read my autobiography and found the courage to come out as a lesbian. A young man who'd been suicidal found hope in reading about how I'd survived the closet. A politician had credited our story with helping him come out and authentically serve his community. There was also a formal letter from the director of the CIA. Mr. Sterling and Mr. Chen ***. It has come to our attention that your story has had a profound impact on LGBTQ+ youth and young adults. The agency has reevaluated our historical policies regarding personal relationships among operatives and is proud to announce new, more humane guidelines. We are grateful for the inadvertent role you played in this evolution.
With respect, ***.
The United States Central Intelligence Agency. I couldn't help but laugh when I read that. It felt absurd and poignant all at once. The organization that had tried to keep us apart was now crediting us with making them better. We changed the CIA, Marcus said, reading over my shoulder. We changed ourselves, I corrected. The CIA is just trying to catch up. 30 years after coming out, I was still the same Adrian Sterling in many ways. I still worked hard. I still had a keen mind for business. I still cared deeply about building things that mattered. But I was also completely different. I was happy, I was authentic, I was loved, and I allowed myself to receive that love without fear or suspicion. I'd learned that happiness wasn't about achievement or accumulation, it was about the people you chose to share your life with. Marcus and I had settled into a quiet kind of contentment. We had our routines, we had our inside jokes, we had the kind of love that came from decades of choosing each other, not just in the grand moments but in the small ones too. Our kids were grown now. Maya was working for an LGBTQ plus rights organization. James was studying social work, planning to work with foster children. They'd both grown into beautiful, compassionate adults. One evening, sitting on our porch with glasses of wine, watching the sunset, I said to Marcus, "Do you ever think about that day, the day you knocked on my office door?" "Every day," he said. "I think about how terrified I was, how I didn't know if I could actually do it, if I could actually tell you how I felt." "I'm glad you did," I said. "Even though it started with a lie." "Especially because of that," I said, "because it forced me to confront who I was hiding from, it forced me to be brave." He took my hand and we sat in silence, watching the light fade from the sky. "Thank you," he said after a while.
For what?
"For fighting for us, for not accepting the easy answer, for believing that what we had was worth the risk." "Thank you for coming back," I said, "for loving me enough to risk your career, your safety, everything." If you're reading this and you're someone who is struggling with your identity, who is scared about coming out, who is wondering if you'll ever be able to live authentically, I want you to know something. Your life can change. Not immediately, not without cost. Coming out was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It was also one of the best decisions I've ever made. The path won't be linear. There will be setbacks. There will be people who disappoint you. There will be days when you wonder if you made a mistake, but there will also be days of profound joy. Days when you wake up and realize you're living the life you always wanted to live. Days when you're so grateful to be yourself that it feels like a miracle. Marcus and I had an unusual beginning. We met under false pretenses. Our relationship started with a lie, but what we built from that foundation is real and true and lasting. Your beginning might be different. You might come out to family who accepts you immediately. You might find love with someone who was honest with you from the start. Your path might be easier than ours, or harder, or completely different. But I promise you this, if you choose authenticity, if you choose honesty, if you choose love, even when it's scary, even when it's hard, you will find your way to a life that feels true. I spent 32 years running from who I was. The greatest decision I ever made was stopping running and turning to face it instead. Do the same, turn around, face who you are, embrace it, claim it. You are worthy of that kind of radical self-acceptance. And maybe, if you're lucky, you'll find someone to share that journey with, someone who loves you so completely that you can finally believe in your own worth. That's the real story here, not the spy thriller element, not the drama of coming out to a company and the world. The real story is about learning that you deserve to be loved completely, exactly as you are. I learned that from Marcus, and now I'm passing it on to you. Be brave, be honest, be yourself. It's the greatest gift you can give to the world.